You gonna move? Scream in my ear once you're out. Alright. I mean it. I know everyone loves you more, but I also need my hearing. This year's Midgardsblot was up against some pretty stiff competition from itself, from previous years. There was the catharsis of 2022, the Heilung and Vardruna year, which is pretty funny because, at least for me, looking back at that lineup, it was actually, other than Heilung and Vardruna, it was pretty hit or miss, right? A lot of people even forget that Rotting Christ also headlined that year and that no one mentions it, right? And there's just this emotional weight behind the 2022 Midgardsblot that is what we really remember it for, right? It was our first time all coming together after the pandemic. You know, the festival had stopped for a few years, and coupled with just the once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity for Heilung and Vardruna to headline the same festival. That's what made 2022 such a standout year for so many people. But then you move along to 2023, and the lineup in 23 was absolutely insane. And just in case any of you are forgetting or underappreciating just how stacked that lineup was, let's get a refresher, right? Einherjar, Enslaved, Fintroll, Gangar, Garmana, Joltun, Isak, Kampfar, Katarina Baruch, Mariboina, Mio, Mortis, My Dying Bride, Nordjevel, Savulo, Sylvain, Shooter, Wolfaz, Steve Von Till, Orm, Nena Barslev, Nabala, Tyr, and before what happened, I don't want to hear a single one of you claiming that you were not excited for Blackbraid. So between the cathartic, emotional weight of 2022 coming off of the pandemic and that insane lineup of 2023, 24 had some cards stacked against it, right? But instead of comparing directly between the festivals, I think it's healthier and more productive, especially as now this is my third year going, to look at what each year does really well on its own merit, right? As opposed to looking at these festivals in an overly simplistic, like better or worse binary, right? It simply put, I guess what I'm going to be talking about in this video is what were the things that this year did right for itself? What are the things that this year did that made me incredibly happy and grateful to have the opportunity to have gone to Midgardsblot this year? What made 2024's Midgardsblot memorable in its own right? Now, just a couple of orders of business I want to make sure I get out of the way first before I get into the weeds here, is I want to make sure that I give a shout out to the incredible volunteers at Midgardsblot. That's right, the incredible volunteers that make this festival happen, okay? I see it every year, but this year I saw it more, right, as I'm getting to know more and more people who do volunteer, is just the incredible amount of work and dedication that goes into volunteering at this festival to make sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes for everyone else who goes to this festival. I just really don't feel like I can accurately put into words how much I appreciate, and how much we all should appreciate how much the volunteers put into making this festival work for us. So, from me, thank you guys, all the volunteers, for what you do to make this festival happen. And the other thing is that, this is the first year I was invited by Midgardsblot to come to the festival in an official capacity to cover it and, make content for it. Which is, honestly, as a musicology channel, that's just, unreal to me, Relatively speaking, this is still a pretty small channel, but even more importantly is that the payoff for inviting me to this festival to cover it is so much more of a slow burn than other media outlets, right? I'm not doing these amazing photographs or these high-quality videos, the 4K videos of the live sets. And then when I do talk about and reflect and review the festival, it's in this long-form way, like a video like this, or then in the interviews with the musicians who perform at the festival that come long after the festival has ended. So for someone like me who makes the content that I do, to have been invited to this festival, that's honestly unreal. How many ethnomusicologists are invited to participate in the festivals and the cultures that they cover? It's just anyway, I could go on, but it really means a lot to me. And also, speaking of which, all of you who recognized me and came up to me and told me how much you appreciate the work that I do here. If I could just get a little mushy for a second, right? Being in Colorado covering Nordic music, it's really easy for me to, lose perspective on, does what I do matter, right? And, or is this really just purely for me, which is also fine. But the amount of you who came up to me and expressed your appreciation for what I do for Nordic music here on this channel. Again, how many ethnomusicologists get that? Very few. And so I'm a pretty lucky guy, and I really appreciate all of you who went out of your way to say hi and tell me how much you appreciate the work that I do here. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, let's get into the meat and the potatoes of this festival. I think it's best for me to just start out with who were my standout sets. I'm going to do this in two ways. I put a poll, as always, up on the Midgardsblot official community page. And so all the bands that made it to the top of that list, I'm not going to mention in my standout sets, even if there was, of course, overlap. I just don't want to talk about the same band twice. I don't think you want me to talk about the same band twice. And I just want to be upfront that my major qualifier for standout sets this year was that I find that as I attend more music festivals across genres, and as I see more and more concerts now that I live in Denver, which is, a huge stopping point for so many musicians, I'm really losing patience for bands that don't have any stage presence. And I don't know if that's just a me thing, or I don't know if anyone else is noticing this, but I'm just noticing a trend that, especially in heavy metal bands, that, they get up on stage and they don't move, right? It's almost like you're supposed to behold the spectacle of seeing this band. And it just reminds me of why Kiss started doing what they do, is, even back in the 70s or 80s, whatever decade that was, the reason Kiss decided to go so outrageous is because of this feeling that bands were starting to feel like you're lucky to see them, right? So I feel like we're starting to see this come full circle again, because last year, that lineup, none of those bands acted like that. All of the sets were, awesome. They were fun to watch. They were electric. They were exciting. And you could tell that they were so happy to be there. And I'm just noticing more and more that stage presence is becoming a lost art. And at least to me, it's becoming even more notable and more appreciated when a band actually goes out of their way to just put on a good show. Right? And so that's a huge qualifier and a bias that I'm going to be having in who my standout sets were, right? And so with that said, the wild card band of the lineup, Texas Cornflake Massacre, I remember when they were announced, everyone was like, okay, sure. I don't know what this band's doing in Midgardsblot, but, they were one of those sets where they opened up the last day? I think they opened up the last day. And at the beginning of their set, 3 rows of people, and then curious listeners in the back. But by the end of their set, everyone was there. And everyone was having such a good time. And it's a band where, they dress up like victims of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the gimmick of, their fans brought cornflakes into the fest. And were just like confetti, throwing cornflakes all over the mosh pit. And then as the day went on, the Midgardsblot community was getting more and more posts like, why are there cornflakes all over the pit? From the people who didn't see them or weren't at the fest yet that early in the day. And it just created this really funny... You could just tell that they had such a positive impact on the actual just general vibe of the fest that day. They set this fun tone that was just so awesome, and it was just very much appreciated. The Texas Cornflake Massacre. As with any of these bands, put down below if they were also one of your favorites, so we can talk about it some more, because they were definitely one of my favorites. But then, of course, another wild card for me, and this is a band that I didn't even listen to leading up to the fest, and when they were announced, I was like, alright, I don't know who that is. Vulture Industries. Again, so much stage presence. They were so much fun. So many people were on the community page talking about, was anyone else blown away by Vulture Industries? Unexpectedly. I went there to check it out of curiosity, and they were just fun. The singer had such this charisma. His whole vibe of, the top hat and the I'm pretty sure it was a jacket or 3-piece suit or whatever he was wearing. he was just so much fun, and you could tell he was happy to be there, and he wanted to put on something that was fun and exciting for us. A personal favorite of mine that I knew would just blow it out of the water was Grand Magus, despite being an old Judas Priest style 3-piece heavy metal band. And the sound guy kind of messed up a little bit for the beginning of their set. You really only hear the bass and the drums. But sound issues aside, Grand Magus, again, had the stage presence of a 5-piece band, but it's only 3 of them and 2 of them at the front, and they both sing, right? I mentioned this when they were announced, is that when they opened for Arch Enemy at the Gates in Amon Amarth a few years ago, they kind of upstaged at the Gates and Arch Enemy with how much fun they were, and, you could just tell that they loved to be there. So, and of course, I was in the front row with my buddy Alex, the Fire in the Mountain guy, and I'm pretty sure it was Grand Magus's Instagram account that it was Alex's first time seeing them live, and he was not prepared for just how much fun that would be. And one of Grand Magus's stage crew took a video on his phone of Alex front and center just banging his head, like having the time of his life, and posted it to their account. And so that was really funny to see. But yeah, Grand Magus was, as expected, super awesome. Johan Hegg from Amon Amarth was in the back off to the side pretty much the whole set, singing along, banging his head. And then he came out for, is it Black Sails, whatever the track is that has, the like that chant at the end of it. Johan ran out onto the stage to sing along with it. And again, I love seeing these musicians, I'll talk about this more later, but I love seeing these musicians be stoked for each other, right? There's just something about it, seeing these musicians support each other and really like hype each other up. So that was just a great set too. Shel Broughton put on his Skaldic set, and, he played this tune that was for his late father, and it was just like, not only was the atmosphere and how incredible he is at, like, that Skaldic music, it was definitely a standout set for me, and it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the first night, and there was just something about setting the tone, where, like, at the end of the first night, you're in the Gildehallen, and, the smoke machine makes it look even more foggy and mysterious as he's playing, like, the lyre, the Trossingen lyre, the Kravik lyre, and the Buka horn, and singing his beautiful songs. And anyway, that was probably my favorite of the Gildehallen sets, even though Newtland, I'll talk about in a second, also put on a really good one. And then, of course, none of you will be surprised by this. Lindy Fi's set was absolutely sublime to me. It was stunning. All of those songs that I've fallen in love with over the last few months that are on the album Islet or Islet, still haven't decided how to pronounce that album name. So many of those songs were even more stunning live. And how Lindy manages to sing like that live is... I don't know how she does it. The other standout is actually the drummer. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but you know those sets where the drummer is just feeling it and he is the drums? That was this drummer. Like, he even did the Lars Ulrich stand up and just friggin' pound on the toms at one point, and he brought so much energy to it that it really made it a fun set to watch. So, with the exception of the pole and also the house bands that I will talk about, those were my standout sets. I probably missed some. That pretty much goes without saying in videos like this, that I will inevitably forget to mention something at every turn, but that's just how it goes. So let's talk about the poll. Every year I have started to make a fun game for myself out of putting up a poll for everyone to they can vote for as many bands as they want. So they could vote for everyone if they wanted to, or they can just vote for one. And so, yeah, we put up all the band names and people vote. And so I put it up a week ago. And keep in mind, the point that I'm recording this video, the actual top 5 can change. But this is at least who won out the poll at the time of me writing these results down and now recording the video. Goes without saying, Amon Amarth took that poll by storm. And here's my piece I want to say about Amon Amarth. You guys know that I think very highly of that band. They are the reason that I got into Norse mythology and Nordic studies in the first place, and now I'm, PhD, get to teach those classes at university. So my journey with this Nordic stuff really does start with Amon Amarth, right? So I will always think very highly of that band and what they do. But I've noticed that in recent years they've become and this just happens when bands become popular, right? They've become the band to hate, or the band to take the piss out of. And especially when you're not at a festival and you're on the internet, metal forums, if you're masochistic or something like that, they're always a punchline, and I never understand it. But with that said, it put so much into perspective this year for me to see. I posted that if 16-year-old Jameson were to have known that someday he would be seeing Amon Amarth play in Norway next to Viking burial mounds, he might have just died of a heart attack, right? And so I was already on cloud 9 because that's just such an existential cosmic thing for me, on a personal level. But seeing the entire festival have the time of their life at Amon Amarth's set, and as I said, they took this poll by double digits, okay? So they were the favorite of the festival by far. But you could even feel that in the crowd. Everyone was having such a good time, and they were fun. And this is addressing that stage presence rant. Amon Amarth, especially Johan Hegg, knows that you are there to have a good time and put on a show, right? You are there for the audience because these people come to this festival and go to see your music because they need to, right? And Amon Amarth knows that, and that's why they put on, a lot of people say these sort of corny over the top sets, but they just know how to have a good time. And when I walked back down to the camp after this, with these thousands of people in that crowd, I walked back to camp, and there's a tent of 7 dudes sitting around drinking, complaining about the, all the dorks up enjoying Amon Amarth. And it just puts something into perspective to see, 1,000 people up here enjoying life, enjoying Amon Amarth, having the time of their lives, and then going down to the empty camp to just a small group of dudes sort of ho-ho, the losers up there enjoying lame, that really puts things into perspective, that the people who are negative and always like that, they're the ones who are just the couple guys alone at camp, right? Everyone else is up there having the time of their lives, and I just think that's poetic. Sorry if you're one of those 7, but you're my punchline now, so. with Amon Amarth out of the way, again, put on an insane set. Of course, the legendary Emperor. This is another example where, like, yeah, black metal sometimes can be guilty of just that everyone stands still for the whole 45-minute set. But Ihsahn was running around playing on a purple Telecaster. The balls on that guy doing black metal on a purple Telecaster. But, you know, being the synthesizer black metal guy, I'm pretty sure that's on brand. Yeah, they came in second in this poll, and that was insane for me to see a legendary band like Emperor live like that. They fit the setting and everything. They brought this special Emperor coffee that one of my friends, I didn't even know this was a thing, and then one of my friends who went last year texted me and was like, yo, I need that Emperor coffee. And I was reading that, like, Emperor coffee? And so I went up to the Midgardsblot merch tent, and was like, Emperor coffee? And they were like, yep, here you go. I was like, all right, guess that's the thing. But yeah, they put on a great set, and you can just tell that, like, especially for a festival like Midgardsblot that has this emphasis on black metal, and Nordic history, Nordic culture, and all that, having a band like Emperor there was, you know, it really was a treat, yeah. Third up, they really blew me away, and you guys know how highly I think of this band. You know, I've had Anatoly on. Nudland. I will say right here plainly that not putting Torem on my best of 2023 list was one of the most egregious snubs of this channel, right? There are 3 albums I can think of off the top of my head that, as time goes on, I really wish I included in that list, the best albums of 2023. And their album Torem is definitely one of those albums. But they, live, are insane. There's so much energy, and this is, Anatoly sits down, he's a very tall individual, okay? He's like friggin' almost 7 feet tall. So he probably sits down to like have it less of a contrast with Natasha, who's up front doing the singing, but even with him sitting down, and he's doing the throat singing, when I was in line for security while they were sound checking, Anatoly was practicing his throat singing, and a guy behind me went, oh, someone's got a didgeridoo. And I just laughed to myself, because I'm like, nope, that's Anatoly. That said, it was not surprising to me in the slightest that Nudland not only put on one of the most electric sets at this festival, but they also ranked very high on this poll. I mean, I want you to put that in perspective. Nudland, this Siberian dark folk group, ranked only slightly behind Emperor, right? Like, put that into perspective. And after them was Sigmund. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I don't really know much about Sigmund. I also didn't really see much of their set. I saw the part for Espen. He was up on stage with them. That was, of course, awesome, and I know Espen loves Sigmund. So I didn't really see it. The set, even from a distance, didn't really sound like it was that much for me. But they ranked high, and that's why I do these polls, because even if it's a band that I wouldn't have mentioned, you know, people clearly love them, and that made me happy to see a band like that be so accepted and appreciated at Midgardsblot. And so after Sigmund, of course, song like, so many people didn't even realize it was Maria Franz in that band from Heilung. People slowly put it together. But, you know, I was up in the front, and I heard so many people being like, yeah, so what is this band all about? And it's just like, over the course, being like, oh, it's it's people from Highland. Anyway, you guys know when they were announced at this festival, I was so excited because I've been listening to their album Gottfolk for so long. They're in that old school style of like Viking market music, that generation before Vardruna and Highland changed the game. But what made that set even better was Nick Schipper on drums. There was this hysterical dynamic where Maria and Ingrid, the two vocalists, had to decide how to kill time while Christoph Yule tuned his mandolins. And they were, telling jokes, telling stories, but you could tell Nick was like, you guys are overthinking it. I know how you kill time in a Midgardsblot set. And he would just raise up his beer and yell skull, and by the end of the skull, Christopher would have his mandolin tuned. So Nick knew how to play the game, and it just cracked me up every time he did it, because without fail, it bought enough time for Christopher to tune his mandolin. But then also the energy, I talk about this on the channel plenty, is like the energy of that old school kind of Viking music is just unparalleled in the current generation of Viking music, right? With the exception of a band like Savulo, they put a lot, and of course Heilung has electric stage presence. But with song there's just this energy where the whole time, if you don't have a beer, you're like, I should go get a beer because this is the music that you drink to. And it was really awesome for me to see the people who are from the newer generation of Viking music just get down to a band like Song Like. And seeing how much people loved them is sort of also what informed, at the end of this video, I'm going to do bands that I still want to see next year. And so I definitely have some bands that are more in that style, the more upbeat, old school style of medieval market music. So those are the bands that sort of topped the poll, but I really want to give a shout out to something that Midgardsblot does that I find amazing, just to put it bluntly, and that is the support that they give for local small bands. Last year there was Rune with the 2 U's. They were a local band, and they were one of my favorites from the whole festival. And then also you had these up-and-coming Oslo bands. You might have heard of them, Gangar and Mio. Both of them appeared on my Best of 2023 list. They put on some of the best shows at Midgardsblot last year. So it's becoming this thing for this festival to give the time to these younger... The kids from Berserk were teenagers? And people were talking about them the whole first day. You gotta see these kids, man. They put on this insane set. And so it's becoming a staple of Midgardsblot to really give young up-and-coming bands time to shine or to prove themselves, and that is just such an amazing thing that Midgardsblot is doing. And I really wanted to make sure that I just highlighted those younger up-and-coming bands that played at the festival this year. They all did great, and so many people thought that they stole the show as the younger bands. So that is what it is. I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that aspect of Midgardsblot that I've really enjoyed this year, and I hope it stays and continues to be a huge part of the festival. And then, of course, let's talk about the house bands. What do I mean about the house bands? Folkeborte for Nordevinden, Eldrim, Runehild, Astralside, all of them. For so many people, they are the reason that Midgardsblot exists, and they are the reason that so many people go year after year. Folkeborte for Nordevinden put on a show every single day, and poor Benny had to miss Testament to put on his Gildeholland set on was that Friday, I believe, and for all 3 days you can tell he's so tired, but his spirit is so full from just performing for people, because Benny is such a rock star. He's fully acoustic set, but he's standing up on the monitor hyping people up during Uriskahaso. And Folkeborte for Nordevinden is in so many ways the heart and soul of Midgardsblot. and why so many people go and have such a great time. And then, of course, Eldrim had their first outdoor set. They were so great. So many of those songs off the new album, Daughterstev, were better live than they are on the album, even if I already loved them on the album. There were some sound issues during that stage, but I don't think they at all took away from just how good Eldrim's performance was. And so many of those songs, like Hilda's Lullaby that she wrote, so many people were feeling that, right? And Daughterstev, the title track, was also amazing live. Runehild and Gustav closed out the whole festival with their rave, and I posted a video to Instagram in the community. Just something about the way that Runehild is dancing with her staff, and she has like all these things like dangling off of her, literally dancing like an alchemist that just like brewed up the best health potion you've ever had. That also has maybe some hallucinogenic side effects. They're just such the best way to close out the whole festival, and I don't know if it might get like repetitive, or maybe they don't want to close out every festival, but it's just good vibe way. Runa, the organizer, let them go as late as they wanted to on the last night, and it just ends the festival in this good vibe, gives people a chance to like talk and enjoy the good music and all of that. So, oh yeah, and that's the highlight I want to do. They decided to have all of the last concerts of the fest this year outside rather than in the Gildehallen. Amazing. That was such a good call because it created this dynamic where last year, if you didn't get into the Gildehallen in time, you just left because there was nothing to do. And that's not the best feeling. Maybe that was just like an unforeseen side effect of course you want the Gildehallen to be the centerpiece, but it did have that unfortunate side effect where if you didn't fit into the limited space in Gildehallen, you would just go back to camp, which is a weird feeling. So this year they decided to have these last concerts like Song Lake, and Runehild and Gustav, and outside, under the trees, by the bar, by the tables, so people can all come and enjoy the last music of the night before going back to camp, right? So I thought that was a wonderful change that they did this year, to have the closing acts of the night, those midnight bands, play outside. It made such a huge difference for everyone. Excuse me while I cut in here, but I realized that I missed a very important house band while editing. I know this video is already long enough, but Frigsdotra is one of my absolute favorite groups to see every year at Midgardsblot. So I just wanted to do a little shout out to them, just because I love them so much. And their set in the Gildehallen even like literally brought me to tears. They had a song that was just so beautiful. They do like old style, like a little bit more faithful to the time period, still not Viking age, but more medieval, which is kind of the closest we got. So anyway, please check out Frigsdotra and show them some love because they deserve it. There are for the extracurriculars and also like my personal highlights. Let's talk about my favorite memories real quick. Is that Don Shaw, the instrument maker, brought a 19th century style banjo to the festival this year specifically for me to quality check, because he didn't have any banjo players around him that could tell him if he made it correctly or not, and I ended up spending hours a day. I felt bad for taking up their oxygen, and the next day Yoren told me that she was nursing a hangover, and I was like, oh, that's the best thing for a hangover is banjo in your tent. No, but she loved it. I was taking the piss out of each other. But that was a highlight for me, was actually sitting in Folkvanger, probably being the first banjo in Folkvanger. Especially when like the Grimfrost Vikings walked by for one of their reenactment battles, I just kept playing, and there was like such this, disconnect between the marching Vikings and some dude, some crunchy Colorado guy off to the corner playing banjo. But yeah, so Don, thank you so much for bringing that banjo, and I'm looking forward to having it on the side of the pond very soon, because that was definitely memorable for me to be playing banjo at Midgardsblot, and a lot of people stopped to listen, which of course was crazy to think about. And then I also got to meet Arva, the Grimfrost guy. It was a funny way that we ran into each other as I was walking across Volkfanger in the morning, and I heard from behind me, hey, aren't you the YouTube guy? And I turn around and it's him, and I go, hey, aren't you the Grimfrost guy? And we got to chat a bit, which is, I haven't actually gotten to talk much to the Grimfrost guys, and, love what they do. It's especially on the music side of things. I realize I haven't actually talked about him yet, but, they're the label for Hindarfjell, and also Torolf and Folkeborg for Nordavinden. They were Runehild's. Hindarfjell put on this awesome set, and Satan is... I'm going to be talking about this album on the channel soon, but I was blown away by Hindarfjell's new album, and it was also great live. Just a little more stage presence would be nice. Love you guys.
Till mina sköna kläder om vår forna tro.
But got to meet Arva from Grimfrost, and that was just really cool to actually, meet the Grimfrost guy, especially as someone who is like the Nordic music guy. And he also had nice things to say about the banjo, which was crazy to me that my banjo stuff is even on his radar. But enough about me. The other stuff is the Midgard talks were amazing this year. It is unfortunate that now they're like the separate ticket. I wish that wasn't the case, but I also don't really understand how that works on the back end of things. There were so many great Midgards talks. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's when they have scholars and eggheads like myself actually come and give presentations at the museum, and so many of them were amazing. My favorite one was the one that Terria did on death rituals, which actually completely changed the course of my research on the Hardanger fiddle and troll magic and all of that. Because just apparently the dragon that is on the head of a Hardanger fiddle is a Lindorm or a Deathworm, which just completely changes the implications of that for myself. But the talks are great. Someone did this epic takedown of Adam of Bremen as a historical source. I didn't see that one, but everyone was talking about it in the security line about how funny it was and just how calculated it was. So the talks are great. They had the ship from Vikings, the TV show. It was just... Again, as someone who watched that show as a teenager, actually like standing on the ship from the show, it's just like you gotta geek out about it, right? And then of course Peter Franzén, the actor, he played with Hindarfjell. He did the My Mother Told Me tune. But he did this Q&A session about the show. I wasn't there. I had something else to do. I wish I could have seen it though, because for a lot of people that was a highlight, because they loved the TV show. I stopped watching after Ragnar kicked the bucket, because that actor was just so much of the reason why I watched the show. Maybe I'll get to the end of it eventually. Who knows? But that was also really cool to have Peter Franzén there. Like, how insane is that? Yeah. And then, of course, let's talk about the fire. The Bonfire is becoming one of the most hyped reasons for going to Midgardsblot. It's this cathartic moment for a lot of people to let loose, practice this other side of themselves that they don't get to express in daily life. And so it's a very transformative space for a lot of people. Now, I will be very honest with you guys. I was nervous that there was not a dedicated band, like we had Clan Argantia last year, because it's a diplomatic way to say this. If the musicians that come to the Bonfire are not good, kills the vibe. Music is a very powerful thing. And we all talk about how music has the power to heal and uplift and all of that. But if it has the power to do that in that direction, that means that bad music has also the equal power to do the opposite, to destroy, to kill vibes, to ruin the atmosphere, yeah? And so to not have anyone who is directly responsible for the music was actually kind of scary for me. Especially when you get into the topic of gatekeeping, where if you just say someone hey, can you please stop, you're not good enough, that can come off as gatekeepy. But if I can put on my ethnomusicologist hat, in most music cultures, there's a designated class of musicians who train to perform at these types of events. In very few cultures is it just whoever wants to can join in and lead music for something like this. So you have this weird dynamic between I think it's fair to expect that if people want to play music around the fire, they owe it to everyone there to know what they're doing. And so that was just something that was a little nerve-wracking for me, is how is this going to go? And as the festival went on, it got better. It got more and more comfortable. And I just think that overall the vibe was great at this fire. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that it was actually a good thing that they didn't invite an official band to play, to instead just sort of see how it plays out. What happens when you let other people just sort of walk in? Some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. But the stuff that didn't, I think, brought back that spontaneous beauty of it that happened in the 2020-22 year, where people just came together and the music was wonderful. And giving people an opportunity to sing or play around the fire, and they own it, and it really pays off. I think there's an immense amount of value to that, even though the flip side is that you can get some really awkward situations with musicians who probably aren't ready to play in a public setting or something like that. So that's probably the most elitist, if you want to call it, gatekeeping thing I'll say in this video. But yeah, even though I was nervous that there was not a Clan Argantia for the Bonfire, it paid off, especially because so many of the nights the actual bands came down. Hindarfjall came down after their set. The Highland guys and the Songlight guys came down after their set to the fire, and so it was this more spontaneous, allowing other people to enjoy it and just seeing what happens. And I think there's a lot to be said on the value of that. And yeah, the fire was great. I spent the last night just sitting by it, even though it was burning my skin and singeing my beard. I was no, I just need to sit by this for a bit. Now that I kind of work at the festival, it's easy for me to lose the time and lose the perspective on things that I should do for myself, and that was one of them. The fire is always very important for me. And so I guess, now that I've rambled on long enough, this is probably the longest Midgardsblot reflection video I've done, but you can just tell that I have a lot on my mind that I want to make sure that I say. And I guess if I want to close before I talk about the bands I want to see next year, this is my third year. And what brings me back to Midgardsblot year after year is the variety of Nordic music. The one-of-a-kind setting, the beauty of the campground, and of course, the people. The people are who make this festival what it is. And the friends I've made year after year at this festival from around the world are friends that I know that I will have for life. And as Benny even opens up the bloat ritual, the festival is us, right? If the festival is a shit show, it's because we made it a shit show, right? And that's just the funny way that Benny puts it into perspective, that this is not a festival where every step of the way is orchestrated and finely tuned. So much of it is the participation of the people who go to this festival. And so for Benny to say that really puts into perspective, and I really want to make sure I amplify here, is the people are most of the reason that I go to this festival. Of course, as the music guy, I love the variety of Nordic music because I know that whenever I go to Midgardsblot, I am going to see an immense spectrum of Nordic music that I would not see in a single space at any other festival that I could go to, especially with the setting here. I know a lot of like diehard metalheads are like, you know, furious when a band like Belcanto plays, and I don't get it. I think it's the virtue of the festival to bring so many different genres together under the banner of a metal festival, because metal is always first and foremost what this festival is for, as well as like the house bands like Vulcan and Eldrum and all of them. But we are this festival, and we decide if it's good or bad by the way that we act and the way that we carry ourselves and what we put into the festival, just like the volunteers, for instance. And in that way, there's really just nothing like Midgardsblot. And I'm really excited to see all of you there next year. And hopefully Alyssa can finally get her passport renewed. She's been slacking on that. But yeah, hopefully she'll be able to come next year. It's all dependent on if she renews her passport. But I will, at the very least, definitely be there. But no, Cricket cannot come. He would hate the plane ride, and it would just be very stressful for him. I know, but if I can just give a serious answer to why Cricket does not come. That is the reason Cricket stays home with my parents, right? They babysit him. So, with all that out of the way, again, by far the longest Midgardsblot video. If you're still around here, let's talk about bands I want to see next year. I'm going to split it into two categories. I got metal bands I want to see, and I've got folk bands I want to see. The metal bands, a lot of repeat suggestions from last year. Korpiklani, I would love to see Korpiklani at this festival for obvious reasons. Insomnium headlining in the dark under the... I think Insomnium would be an insane headliner for that festival too, with the setting and everything. Panopticon, my boy Austin, I love his music so much, and he is pretty affiliated with a lot, he's affiliated with, Offski and all of these other Nordic black metal bands. He's very ingrained in the scene. A lot of people don't realize that. And so for him to play Midgardsblot, I think would just be a really awesome opportunity. And then, of course, Wolves in the Throne Room. I will not stop beating that drum. I think Wolves would be an awesome headliner too. So those are the metal bands that I really want to see. And then on the folk side of things, I would love to see Blothdיר. I've had them on the channel. They're this wonderful folk group from France. They do this mix of the Celtic and the Nordic stuff, but they also, again, stage presence, they're just so much friggin' fun. They play at Castle Fest. People love them there, so I think they'd be a great fit in Midgardsblot too. Another drum I will keep beating is Hoovendruven. If you loved Gangar, Hoovendruven is the Gen X version of Gangar. They came before Gangar, and Gangar is sort of like, holding their torch forward. Hoovendruven, especially when we had Garmina last year, I just think they would fit really well, and that's a personal, maybe even selfish suggestion of mine because I really want to see Hoovendruven. Then Perkelt, I'm just realizing that I actually don't know where they're from, but if you like the music of The Witcher, Perkelt does a lot of that style. They have a version of Hermanelig that I think is actually kind of, in some ways, more beautiful. Not to make this a competition, but it really rivals Garmina's version of Hermanelig. And they just have this awesome energy that is so iconic to the Celtic side of things. I just think that they would be a great fit at the festival too. And then, if Songlike played this year, that means that you guys would friggin' love Virulai. Virulai is an insane band. Jacob from Heilung is in that band. And they're that old school style of medieval market music, or Viking music if you want to call it that. With drums, strummed instruments, mandolins, flutes, all of that sort of thing. And they're just here for a good time. So those are the bands that I would love to see next year. If they come around, it would be really awesome. But at the same time, I also trust the organizers and the bookers to do what they do best for this festival. And so guys, that's what I have to say about this year. It was a lot because I just have a lot on my mind, because every year that I go to this festival, it just becomes more and more important to not only my work, but also who I am. It's a very transformative experience for people. And again, I just want to make sure that I thank everyone who goes to this festival, who is just a wonderful person. Each and every one of you who goes and makes this festival what it is. It really is a family. It's becoming a family to me, and it's really becoming a pilgrimage for so many people too. And this year, was amazing in its own right, as I said. It's really hard to top the insane lineup of 23 or the emotional catharsis of 22, but in so many ways, 2024 was a really special festival, and of course, I am glad in every way that I went and took the time to do the long hike from Colorado to Norway for it. So, guys, leave down in the comments below what you thought of the festival. What were your favorite parts? Who were your favorite bands? And until then, I do have a lot of interviews lined up from musicians who played this year. Some surprises in there that I'm really looking forward to bringing to the channel. But until then, thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned, take care, be safe, I'll see you later.